Notes from interview with Keith Barnett, B-A-R-N-E-T-T, on Wednesday, September 11th at 10 a.m. With Denise Sanford. First question was, can you describe your past work experience? Before Edward Vogt, I did some roofing work for 1 year, and then after I started with Edward Vogt, I started in the foundry, and then that closed down, and then I did cleaning out the machines, and I've done shipping and receiving, and foundry and presetter, which I believe is what he was when he, at the end when he, Edward Vogt closed down, which is setting the drills for machines. Are you currently working? No. Do you have a CDL license? No. Would you be available for overtime work or weekends? Yes. Do you have any special training or schooling you want to mention? No. What were your major responsibilities in your last position? I was a presetter. I worked the forklift preset, which was setting the drills for the machines. Would you like best in those responsibilities, setting the drills for the machines? You just go do it. What do you like least? The foundry. You shake the molds out, and that shakes, even though you're shaking the dirt down, it still comes up. Let's see. Why did you leave your last job? Layoff. Describe the best supervisor you've had. He was up there like the head man. If stuff was not going right, you'd go to him, and he'd take care of it, whether he was able to take care of it on his own, or if he had to go to the head man, he would get it taken care of. What about the worst supervisor? He talked out the side of his mouth. He'd say you were doing your work, but not fast enough. He says, and you're not. He says, and we weren't on piecework, so he said. He's never really had trouble with any of his supervisors, but this guy was a pusher. What is your strongest asset? Coming to work every day. I don't mind working. What would you like to improve? I think on my job I had it all down, knew it all. Of course, there's always room for improvement, but he felt he knew all of his job. How would your last supervisor describe you as an employee? Hard worker. They would tell him to do something, and by the time they'd come back to see how he was getting along with it, he'd be done and on to something else, and they would say, oh, I was going to have you do that. And he'd say, well, I'm already doing it. So he said he'd been there long enough and knew what needed to be done, and he'd get it done. What did you do in your last job to contribute towards teamwork? When I would be driving the forklift, there'd be the other guy getting the stuff ready that I would need to come, and I would be there ready for him so that when he got the stuff in position, he didn't have to wait on me to come and get it. I was already there waiting. Can you give me an example of a time when you had to go above and beyond the call of duty in order to get the job done? I would stay on overtime because there would be something that would be coming up for tomorrow, and it would have to get done and get ready, and I would stay and make sure it got ready for tomorrow. Can you tell me about a major obstacle you had to overcome in your last job, and how did you handle it? When I was working on the presetter, I just didn't think I could get it, and didn't know how to do it. But the guy kept telling me to hang in there, and he said so I hung in there until I learned it, and then there's nothing to it. What kind of things bother you? People who don't want to work. Somebody will say, oh, let's slow down and not work so fast. And he says, you can slow down if you want to, but I don't have time for that. You just do what you're going to do, but I don't have time for that, and leave me alone. So that was the interview with Mr. Barnett. I do have him set up for an interview with Bob Wucher on Wednesday, September 11th at 2 p.m. That's it for now. After he meets with Bob, I'll add maybe a couple of notes. Thanks, Paula. Okay, Paula, here's the next one. Notes from interview with Gary McQueen, McQueen, on Wednesday, September 11th at 2 p.m. with Denise Sanford. Can you describe your past work experience? I've done a lot of warehouse, and that is what I like to do, anything but Anything that comes through the door has to be accounted for, and you got to do some purchasing. And he's got to do some purchasing at Daunaher. That's Dauenhauer, Daunaher Plumbing. And then he can operate any forklift. He's not that good on the computer, he said. Next question. Are you currently working? No. Do you have a CDL? No. Would you be available for overtime work or weekends? Yes. Do you have any special training or schooling you want to mention? No. What did you do in your last job? I mean, what were your major responsibilities in your last job? They would tell me in the morning. They would tell me what I had to have out at the job sites that day, and then I would make the calls to make sure the material got to the job site. I was responsible for getting everything there to do the job. If the stuff wasn't there and if it wasn't correct, you'd have a plumber sitting out on the job site, just sitting there waiting and not working. What did you like best in these responsibilities? To make sure it's done right. To make sure it's done and done right. I don't like messing up. Would you like least? Nothing. Nothing really bothered me. The only thing that really bothers me is sometimes there's raccoons that get into the warehouse there, and I have to clean up their mess. Why did you leave your last job? He told me at the beginning of the interview, just right up front, he wanted to tell me that he quit due to physical and verbal abuse. That's what he's got on his application. He said what happened was there was another employee there in the office that worked closely to him, and they were trying to weed this person out and get him to quit. So they kept taking away his work more and more and giving it to Mr. McQueen in hopes that this would persuade this person to retire. He believes that the gentleman became jealous because of this, so he started verbally abusing and cussing him out. So every time he'd get up or do something, he would be cussing him out. He said he had talked to management about it. They said they would take care of it and make it stop. It never stopped. And he said it just kept going on and on. And finally, on the one day, the guy was cussing him out. He went to management. They said they'd do something. They didn't do it. He said this had been going on for 2 years. He was tired of it, so he decided it was the time to start something, find a new life, find something better. So he quit. And he said I went to the unemployment office, and they agreed with me. So I guess he's getting his unemployment because they agreed with him. So that's why he left his last job. Describe the best supervisor you've ever had. He said never really thought about it, said he never had any problem with any of them. He learned a lot from this one guy. So I guess he decided that, I guess that was the best supervisor because he learned so much from him. He says, I like everybody and everybody likes me except that one person on this last job. What about the worst supervisor? No. I've had them to come in and chew me out, but that's just part of it, and it wasn't over anything I did, and that's just, they do it, and you respect them. What do you feel is your strongest asset? Me and the way I am. I don't mind to be asked to do anything. What would you like to improve? Learn the computer. How would your last supervisor describe you as an employee? Above average, if they were to tell you the truth. I'm sure they miss me right now. What did you do in your last job to contribute towards teamwork? Everything. I could be sitting there helping one person and somebody else would come up and ask me something about helping them, and I would help them and just still be helping the other person. And people would say, how can you do that? But, let's see. He also said, work is like a marriage. If it ain't both sides giving, find another marriage. Can you give me an example of a time you had to go above and beyond the call of duty in order to get the job done? Every day. At Daunaher, he could be working on an order, and they'd come in and ask him to go clean up where the raccoon had made a mess, and I would do it. I don't mind doing anything. He said, I really would have thought that the order would have been more important, but I'll do what they want me to do. Can you tell me about some major obstacle you had to overcome in your last job, and how did you handle it? That last one, the verbal abuse. I put up with it for 2 years, and I took it, but they kept promising me to do something, and after 2 years, I decided that it's time to start a new life. So I quit. What kind of things bother you? Incompetence. My bedroom might be a mess, but on the job, I want it to be right. And he also, in there, mentioned that he thinks warehousing is easy. That's what he likes to do. When I proceeded to tell Mr. McQueen about the job and what it's going to entail, and I mentioned that it was second shift, he did finally say that he's not interested in second shift. He was afraid it was going to be. He apologized for wasting my time, but he really doesn't want second shift because he takes care of his sister's kids. So he is not interested in the position any further. That's the end of that one. Thanks, Paula. Paula, the attached should be just additional notes to be attached to the employee warning notice on Mark Weyrauch, W-E-Y-R-A-U-C-H. The date of the warning is 9/13/02. Mr. Weyrauch came in for us to issue a warning. Steve Wilton, the union steward here at the home office, was his representation, and it was me, Denise Sanford, and Bob Wuetcher, W-U-E-T-C-H-E-R, that sit in on this. I told Mark that we were bringing him in regarding the incident that happened yesterday, Thursday, over at the Burns Center, and I said that the incident where you threw the piece of wood and the piece of steel up at the break room and bathroom doors. He said, well, Kara says I did, and I said, well, you did. And then I proceeded to show him the warning notice and told him to take a look at it. And he read it, and after reading it, he said, what's this part here about the lack of production? I said, well, when you're throwing the wood and the steel, you're not working. And he said, well, I did throw the wood. And he said, I did throw the wood. So he did check, I agree with employer statement on the warning notice, and he did then sign it. I think that's everything. It's okay. If you just type that up. Thank you. Bye-bye. Paula, one other thing to add in that statement from Mark Weyrauch is that when he said, yeah, I threw it, well, he did say I wasn't throwing it at anybody, but anyway, he didn't deny throwing it. Thank you. Bye. Notes from interview with Tony McLamb, that's M-C-L-A-M-B, on Monday, September 16th at 9 a.m. with Denise Sanford. Can you describe your past work experience? Armored Card, I delivered money. I've done security for U of L, and then I worked for Donaldson. I built at Donaldson, D-O-N-A-L-D-S-O-N, I built dust control equipment and also the U.S. Army. Are you currently working? No. Presently, I'm in school. And do you have a current Class A CDL? No. Would you be available for overtime work or weekends? Yes. And do you have any schooling, or special schooling or training? I'm currently attending RETS, R-E-T-S. What were your major responsibilities in your last position? I was in charge of about 6 guys to make sure the units got out to the customers on time, all the time, and to make sure everyone was trained and knew how to do their job and keep a safe workplace. What did you like best in those responsibilities? Everybody was on the same level of morale. Everyone was happy. Everyone was on the same team. What did you like least? When they took my job to Mexico. And why did you leave your last job? The company relocated to Mexico. Describe for me the best supervisor you've ever had. He was a people person. He made you feel good. When I first started, he gave me, and I didn't know anything about building dust control equipment, he gave me 3 weeks to learn how to do the job, and I promised him I would know how to do it. What about the worst? I think that supervisor had a racial setback. We got along because I got we got along because I cannot afford to lose my job, but he was not a friendly, he was not very people friendly. He had an attitude that I am the supervisor and I can do what I want. What do you feel is your strongest asset? I work hard and I love coming to work and I love working with people. I have a friendly attitude. What would you like to improve? I am a well-rounded person. I don't really know. I need improvement on everything I know, but presently I'm pretty much well-rounded. How would your last supervisor describe you as an employee? Guarantee. He could guarantee that I would be there every single day and on time. What did you do in your last job to contribute towards teamwork? Made sure that I made sure that everyone along with myself knew how to build the equipment and I would get around and check and see if there was anything, if necessary. And hold on, what does this say? Okay. Made sure everyone knew how to build the equipment and would get around and check to see if and give a hand when necessary. Can you give me an example of a time when you had to go above and beyond the call of duty in order to get the job done? There was one of the pieces of equipment that needed a bar replaced in it before it could go out, and it was getting to be quitting time, and I made sure that I got it out, and I stayed and got that bar replaced so that it could go out, and when necessary I would stay and help load trucks. Can you tell me about some major obstacle you had to overcome in your last job, and how did you handle it? There was one time I was late 15 minutes because of traffic, and I overcame it because I didn't get, they took that 15 minutes away, and so that was how I overcame it. What kind of things bother you the most? When people can't get along with me because of my color. That was it with the interview with Mr. McLam. He did go over an interview with Bob Butcher, and Bob liked the gentleman as well. Thanks, Paula. Notes from interview with Eric Coy on Monday, that's Coy, C-O-Y, on Monday, September 16th at 10:30 a.m. with Denise Sanford. Can you describe your past work experience? I worked at Louisville Ladder for 4.5 years doing production. You had a number of ladders to get out, and before that I was at Publishers, and I did mailbag, and then I did book stacker. Are you currently working? No, I've been unemployed for 3 months. Do you have a CDL license? No. Would you be available for overtime work or weekends? Yes. Do you have any special schooling or training that you want to add to this? No. And tell me about your major responsibilities in your last job. There were a certain number and percentages of ladders to get out every day, and you were required to get out at least 80%, and me and my partner that I worked with usually had that percentage done by lunchtime. And what did you like best in your responsibilities? I was pretty much my own boss. You walked in and was told what to do, and that was it. And let's see, what did you like least? Never had a problem with it. Sometimes not like how they kept you in the dark. If someone asked about possible layoffs and everything and felt like they kept you in the dark. And why did you leave your last job? The plant closed for relocation. They moved to Mexico. And before that, I left Publishers because I did not feel like the job was going anywhere. I was there 2 years doing the same stuff. And my girlfriend's father worked at Louisville Ladder, and he helped get me on. Describe for me the best supervisor you've had. Easy to get along with. As long as you did your job, he left you alone. What about your worst supervisor? Never really had a bad supervisor at Publishers. I had 2, but never had any problem with them. What do you feel is your strongest asset? I'm a hard worker, responsible to be at work every day. What would you like to improve? Don't really know. How would your last supervisor describe you as an employee? Hopefully he would say that I was a hard worker and he would rehire me. We never had a problem. And what did you do in your last job to contribute towards teamwork? Got out the number that I needed of ladders, always worked with someone else, but we got it done. Can you give me an example of a time when you had to go above and beyond the call of duty in order to get the job done? Many times our supervisor asked us to stay over to get some ladders out, and we always stayed over. Can you tell me about a major obstacle you had to overcome in your job, and how did you handle it? The layoff. There wasn't much I could do. It was a rough time. Tried to figure out how to pay the bills and figure it's got to get a job. What kind of things bother you the most? At Louisville Ladder, there were people sometimes sitting around not doing their job, and they would get mad because then they would get written up and they'd get mad about it. If I'm putting in my 110%, then I think everyone else should be. And anyway, Eric seems like a possible candidate, and I spoke to Bob, and Bob agreed that he deserves a second look as well. Thanks, Paula. Notes from interview with Zachary, Z-A-C-H-A-R-Y, Morton, M-O-R-T-O-N, on Monday, September 16th at 2 p.m. with Denise Sanford. Can you describe your past work experience? Doing tractor trailer for the last 4 years. Last 4 years since moving here. I've did shipping and receiving for about 4 years. Really like that. I was laid off on that February of '98. Done odd jobs until moved here. I did car repair back in the 70s and 80s. Are you currently working? No. Do you have a Class A CDL? Yes. Do you know your way around the Louisville area? A little bit. Yes. Would you be available for overtime work or weekends? Yes. Do you have any special schooling or training? No. And what did you do in your last job? What were your major responsibilities in your last job? Picked up freight and delivered it. What did you like best in those responsibilities? Making sure I did the job right. Pride in my work. Least. Did not like working for places that won't help you out if you are having a problem. And as an example, he said at M&M he had a couple of problems with customers, and he went to management and they said too bad and made no effort to straighten it out. And why did you leave your last job? For the reasons just stated. Wouldn't help you out with a problem. And describe for me the best supervisor you've ever had. Pleasant individual, trusted, treated you good, and pay was fair. And if you needed time off, he was more than willing to work with you. What about the worst? That was back in the 70s. He would yell at you if you made a mistake. Have not had too many bad supervisors. Paula, could you add this additional sentence under the best supervisor? After I said that he would more than willing to work with you if you needed time off, he was generally a good guy. If you had a problem, he would come up and talk to you about it and not scream at you. Okay, and then the worst supervisor, which I've already told you. And then what is your strongest asset? Which he wasn't sure at first what I meant, but then he said, I pride in myself at being on time. I'm a self-motivator, give 100%, take very little time off, and if I do for a reason, I make sure I give like a month's notice. What would you like to improve? Looks like I forgot to ask that question. Next question. How would your last supervisor describe you as an employee? Hope he would say I was a good employee. If there was weekend work, I was always the one of the first he would ask to come in. And let's see. What did you do in your last job to contribute towards teamwork? I did whatever they asked and do the job to the best of my ability. Always got along with coworkers. Can you give me an example of a time when you had to go above and beyond the call of duty in order to get the job done? If I was asked to work over, I would do it before, I would do it without having to go on, hold on. I would do it before even thinking about going home, where others would either go on home earlier or at least go on home on time. Can you tell me about a major obstacle you had to overcome in your job, and how did you handle it? The last day when I was at M&M, I went out to a customer, and it was just one of my normal fruit deliveries, but they sent me over to the other side, which always holds me up when I get sent over there. And I was being paid by the run, and when they sent me over to the other side, they always hold me up and make me go slower. And since I'm getting paid by the run anyway, I went and talked about it, and we got into a heavy discussion, and words were said. Hold on. Anyway, I got interrupted there. Anyway, he went in and he had got into a heavy discussion, and words were said, and he was just trying to do his job, and he can't do it if he's getting interference, so he quit the job. And what kind of things bother you the most? I don't like people spreading rumors. I'd like to see things running smooth. I know it can't always happen, but just don't like it, especially when there's stupid stuff. That was the end of the interview. I'm not considering him any further for the position. Thanks, Paula. You might make a note that one reason is because he doesn't really have that much experience in the field with steel or anything. And also, just the few things he said, I feel like he might be a problem person.
It is October 3rd at approximately 4:45 p.m. Memo to the file of Calvin Harris, CalvinHarris, by Kevin Harbison. Kara Harris, operation manager at the Burn Center, called me this afternoon and told me that she had posted for overtime today and nobody signed up for it. And under the union contract, she was going to therefore post mandatory overtime. She needed 3 people to stay, and from 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. I told her that was fine. She then proceeded to tell me that there was only 3 people left in the shop, so it was therefore everybody in the shop. Mark Wyrock had already had scheduled time off today, so he was off before the mandatory overtime kicked in. Robbie Hicks, his wife, came in. She was extremely ill. He had to take the daughter. It needs to be noted that Robbie is under FMLA. His daughter is suffering from cancer, and she's getting ready to undergo more chemo. And the girl is not supposed to be around anybody who has an illness. Therefore, he had to, under FMLA, be excused to take care of the daughter. And then Mike Mahurin had injured himself at work, was workers' comp. He had went to the doctor put him off work. So the only people we were left was Stephen Dale Wyrock, Calvin Harris, and Mark Halsey. She posted for all 3 of those to work. She called me back later in the afternoon and told me that when she said something to 3 of them, did they see the mandatory overtime, that they told her Stephen Dale Wyrock told her that he couldn't work because he had to pick his daughter up from cheerleading, and Calvin Harris said he couldn't work because they had a parent-teacher conference to go to tonight. Mark Halsey said he was going to work. Kara called me immediately, and at that point I told her that under the contract provision that because we were having everybody stay, that they were all required to work, and it didn't matter what the reason was, that if business had to go out, they were required to work. I asked her what had to be done. She has a slew of orders that are past due for several customers that are behind, that they're waiting for, that she needs to get done. She's already posted tentative overtime for Friday and Saturday, but that has not become mandatory yet. And losing my train of thought here. So at that point, I told her, I said, Kara, I said, you need to tell these guys that they have to work. I said, if they don't work, it's considered insubordination and they're subject to termination. So I said, you need to tell them they need to work. I said, go ahead and fax me over the 3 postings that you did on the overtime, and let me look at them, and I will call David Harper, the union president. I will tell him what's going on and ask him to intercede, to call these guys and talk to them, so that I don't have to terminate someone. So she faxed them to me. I looked at them. Everything looked fine. I called Dave Harper on the on his cell phone at home, asked him to... So I talked to Harper and asked him to intercede, and so I wouldn't have to terminate somebody. We went over it. He said, no, remember what Russell said, if it's for good reason, they don't have to. I said, that's a different scenario where you have multiple people that can work, but you don't need everybody to work. But when you've got you need everybody. Again, what I said is when you're needing everybody there to work, they all have to work, regardless of the reason they don't have a choice. He then said, well, can I call over there and talk to him? I said, that was fine. So I said, well, give me a minute to call Kara to let her know that you're going to be calling so she'll let you talk to the guys. So I called Kara, told her what was going on, explained to her what the conversation I had with Harper, and told her that he would be calling to speak to him. While I was talking to her, he called. She let him talk to Stephen Dale Wyrock and Calvin Harris. He talked to both of them for a few minutes. And then Kara called me afterwards to tell me that they still were not going to stay. So I then had Kara put me on the speakerphone in my office. I was on the phone speaking to them at theirs on the speakerphone. And I asked them both if they were staying. They said no. Again, Stephen Dale Wyrock told me that he had to pick his daughter up from cheerleading and said he couldn't stay, and Calvin just said he couldn't stay. And I explained to them that, I understand what it's like to have kids. I have 3 kids of my own. Things come up. But I said, on the other side, we are a business, so we need to operate. We've got customers we have to take care of, because if we don't, we'll all be out of a job. And I said, sometimes business necessitates that we make other arrangements so that we can work. And I said, according to the company contract that we have with the union, we have a mandatory overtime clause, and in this case, we need to get this work done. We're going to have to mandatory them. They are going to have to work. And I asked them again if they were going to work, and they said no. And Stephen Dale said, well, we've got out of it before. And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. And then I said, what I need you to understand is if you guys walk out the door tonight, that is considered insubordination. I said, insubordination is subject to termination. Do you understand? And I said, if you walk out that door tonight, I'm going to have to terminate you. And I said, are you going to work? And at that point, I asked Stephen, and he said, let me see if I can make some other arrangements for somebody else to pick up my daughter. And he said, if I can, then I'll work. And I said, okay. And I said, Calvin? And Calvin said, I can't stay. I'm out of here. I said, well, Calvin, I said, I hate to tell you this, but then effective immediately, I'm going to have to suspend you pending a termination investigation. And I said, do not report back to the shop tomorrow for work. And he said, okay. And he left. And then I told Kara got back on the phone, and I told Kara, I said that, excuse me, to call me back and let me know whether or not Stephen Dale made other arrangements to have his daughter picked up and whether he'd be working. She called me back and said he did find other arrangements and he was going to be working tonight. So that's it.